Whoa, got some weird lighting today. I don't know what's going on the wall back there. Maybe I don't usually, obviously, I think everybody knows I record these Morning Pitt videos the day before. I don't wake up at 5 in the morning and tape it and then release it. I recorded the day before. Maybe I recorded this at a unique time that I don't usually record, and we've got different types of sunlight coming in here in the Panther-Lair studios, but it's different. A little starburst behind me and on my face too, and dogs barking. Everything's going crazy. Everything's getting weird here on today's Morning Pit. But hey, what better way to start off the week and the first Morning Pit of June? Start off the first week of June. You know what it's all about. It's all about recruiting this month. The official visits start this, later this week. The recruits will be coming to Pitt Thursday through Saturday. Going to be a bunch of visitors, going to be a bunch of commitments, going to be a bunch of recruiting news and action, which is always exciting. We always look forward to this month. We celebrate this month. It's, I don't know what you would call it, Recruitmas, Sun Ra. The sun god will be, shining upon us with the bright light of commitments and the promise of a better tomorrow. But it got me thinking. And I mean, you've already seen the headline here, so we don't need to bury it about, what we're going to be talking about today. It's about recruiting, and it's about high school recruiting. Before we dive into the official visits and who's coming to town and who Pitt's going to land and all of those things, we talk about the general topic of high school recruiting because, well, I think everybody probably feels like it's lost some of its luster in the wake of everything that's sort of happened and developed in college football over the past 5 years or more. And so let's talk about it today. How much does it still matter? Does it still matter, high school recruiting, and how much does it still matter? Let's talk high school recruiting. Let's talk about the value of high school recruiting in college football. Let's get your week started with some Pitt talk here on the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's a Monday edition of the Morning Pit, the June 2nd edition of the Morning Pit, our first Morning Pit of the month of June, which is always the biggest month of the year when it comes to recruiting. Bigger than December when they have signing day. I mean, that's a big month for recruiting, of course, but there's a lot of other things going on there. February used to have sort of an exclusive hold on all the big recruiting news, but since they moved the signing day to December, that gets overshadowed a little bit by conference championship games and the playoffs and coaching changes and the transfer portal and all the other things going on. June is still pretty much dedicated to recruiting. There's not much else going on. There's nothing else really going on in the world of college sports, nothing that really grabs your attention. And so college football recruiting can take center stage, and it does. And it'll take center stage later this week for Pitt when the Panthers welcome, or the coaching staff welcomes, a bunch of recruits in for official visits. We'll talk about all of that. I mean, we've got about 24 names on the list right now of recruits who are going to visit this weekend. That number will probably change a few times. It'll go down. It'll go up. It'll move around. It might end up settling right in around 20 or 24. It might be a little bit less. Might be a little bit more. And, chances are relatively good that, once we get into the official visit weekend, it'll keep changing. We'll find out guys are there that we didn't expect. We'll find out guys who we expected to come in didn't make the visit. And so that's going to be ongoing. But suffice to say, there's going to be a lot of Pitt targets on campus this weekend for official visits, which means that recruitment, that commitment list is going to climb. And we'll talk about that again. We'll talk about that later in the week. We'll have a full official visit preview for you on Thursday. Of course, we'll have the mailbag on Friday. Wednesday night's live show, with me and Jim Hammett. We're going to be talking about lots of recruiting stuff and talking about the official visit weekend. So we have lots of time to talk about that. But today's a big picture day, big picture Monday. Maybe we should make that our new, we're not going to make that a thing. It'd be fun to have a big picture day where, once a week we just take a long view, a wide angle view. Maybe we can make Thursday big picture day or something like that. Because once you get into the season, Monday is like recap the game day, you know what I mean? And Tuesday is sort of, day after day, the day after thoughts. Maybe Wednesday could be big picture Wednesday. And then by Thursday, you're looking ahead to the next week's game and everything like that. So maybe Wednesday could be big picture Wednesday. We'll have to workshop that one a little bit. But for now, today is big picture Monday, and big picture about recruiting and the state of recruiting and whether recruiting, high school recruiting, still matters in college football. And obviously I'm going to say yes. I think you already saw that one coming. Oh, you know what I haven't said yet, though? like and subscribe. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You thought I was going to skip it, didn't you? You thought we had all this forward momentum and I was just going to keep rolling. I was going to skip all the promos and all that stuff you don't want to hear as you're trying to skip ahead because you just want to have Pitt talk. You don't want me telling you to like and subscribe. But I got to tell you to like and subscribe. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. How am I ever going to get the 400 million subscribers if I don't keep asking you every day to like and subscribe, right? I mean, like, do the math. I can't get the 400 million subscribers if I don't ask you to like and subscribe. So, like this video, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, for all the Pitt sports news. The recruiting news this week is going to be hot and heavy, rolling in strong, and you don't want to miss any of it. Panther-Lair.com. So I was going to say, I started thinking about this topic yesterday, but I think about recruiting all the time, right? I mean, like, you do this job, you think about recruiting all the time. It's part of the deal. And I think if you read Panther-Lair.com, you probably think about recruiting a lot too. So I can't say I just started thinking about this yesterday, but yesterday I did find myself thinking about it a little bit more than usual. So I was down in the South Side yesterday. I was at Pitt's practice facility where the coaches were holding their first prospect camp of the summer. What does a prospect camp look like? Well, they're out at their outdoor fields. They've got the indoor field going. They've got about 300 high school kids. They're working with the Pitt coaches, working with the Pitt players who serve as player coaches. Some of them do. And they are working out, trying to get better, getting coached by college coaches, getting coached by D1 players, trying to get better, hoping to earn a scholarship offer. Everybody's hopes and dreams are riding on these camps. And occasionally a few offers do come out. One of the cool elements of these camps, and a lot of schools do this, is it's not just Pitt coaches in attendance. There's Miami of Ohio coaches and Duquesne coaches and James Madison coaches and Slippery Rock coaches and IUP coaches. And the list goes on and on. There's usually 20 or 30 colleges represented, Westminster coaches, every sort of division. There's no other Power 4 coaches at this camp, but I mean, you've got MAC and, G5 FBS coaches, you've got, FCS coaches, you've got D2 coaches, D3 coaches, NAI, whatever it might be. You've got all levels. So a kid who comes to this camp is going to get coached by the Pitt coaches and ideally get evaluated by the Pitt coaches. And then, but they're also going to be seen by all of these other coaches. And we've even seen, like, from yesterday's camp, Tristan Reed, the wide receiver from Washington, PA, got offers from, I think, Duquesne and Miami of Ohio from his performance at the Pitt camp. So, it's not just 300 guys showing up trying to get an offer from Pitt. I mean, they are, but it's also 300 guys showing up working out with Pitt coaches, ideally getting better at football from it, learning some extra techniques and things, and then also having an opportunity to show what they can do in front of coaches from other colleges. And so guys come from all over. There's a ton of Western PA guys there, of course, but there were kids there from New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland. I think, South Carolina. There was a couple kids from Georgia. I forget if there was anybody from Florida, but there was at least one kid from Texas. There were a bunch of kids from Quebec. This school from Quebec sent a big group down. And so kids come from all over for these camps. And a lot of, every college holds these prospect camps. Pitt's got 2 this year, this one, and then one again in 2 weeks on Father's Day. Shout out to Pitt for having Father's Day camps. Love it. My family's a big fan of those. So I'm down in the South Side and I'm watching. I mean, because, they're not going to offer 300 guys, but you'll see some interesting players. You get a sense of some guys who might be on the radar. There's a lot of underclassmen. They're not just seniors. So you get a sense, hey, there's a young up-and-coming guy at wherever, Aliquippa or someplace. Better keep an eye on him. He looks good. And so it's a good opportunity to sort of get down there and, see some recruits, see some prospects, watch some guys work out, probably bump into the Pitt coaches, that kind of thing. It's a good thing to do. We go to these every year. We feel like it's important. And so we're there, and, I put a little write-up on Panther-Lair.com yesterday, just kind of running down some of the guys that stood out to me. But as I'm watching, I start thinking about recruiting, and I start thinking about recruits, and I start thinking about how there's official visits coming up at the end of this week, and I'm thinking about this prospect camp, and maybe there's some Pitt targets that are going to, emerge here and all these things, and I'm thinking about it, and inevitably I start thinking about, well, Does all this stuff matter? Like, in 2025, 5 years into the transfer portal or 4 years into the transfer portal, 5 years, maybe even more than that, 5 years into NIL and all these things, is it still relevant? The cynical person could sit back and say, why even pay attention to this? Right? Why pay all that close attention to these official visits? Half the guys who commit over the summer are going to be decommitted by the time you get to signing day. Half of the ones you actually sign are probably going to transfer by their second year in college. So why pay that close of attention to it? And you know what? That's a fair question. And I think, what you end up with is sort of a question of not just does high school recruiting still matter, but has high school recruiting been completely replaced in terms of significance and importance and value by the transfer portal? And again, as a guy who covers high school recruiting, I sit back and say, no, high school recruiting is still immensely valuable. But I can't deny the fact that last year for Pitt, the leading passer was a transfer. The leading rusher was a transfer. The leading receiver was a transfer. The leading tackler was a transfer. And in addition to countless others, right? Like, you have almost every major stat line filled by a transfer. Eli Holstein, Desmond Reed, Kanate Mumfield, Donovan McMillan. And you know what? That was the case in 2023. I forgot who ended up being the leading passer. Christian Bear ended up being the leading passer. The leading rusher was Rodney Hammond, so that was a high school guy. But then you had, Kanate Mumfield and Bub Means as your top two receivers. Donovan McMillan was still your top, your top tackler at the safety position. Another transfer. And so to sit here and say that no, high school recruiting is still the most important thing. It's still the most crucial way to add talent to your team. I mean, that would be disingenuous. And I'm not going to sit here and try to sell you a bill of goods, I guess, as they say. But I would say this. For a school like Pitt, and it's not even just schools like Pitt, but particularly for a school like Pitt, high school recruiting still carries a whole lot of importance. Not as much as it once did, because you're not going to build the entirety of your team, or the bulk of your team even, from high school recruiting. Well, let me say it this way. You're not going to build as much of your team from high school recruiting as you did in the past. Okay, because the transfer portal is a real thing. It is a real asset. It is a source of talent, and it's incredibly valuable. And no one can ignore it. No one can afford to ignore the transfer portal. Clemson tried, and then they gave up on that wisely, because why would you? Why would you give up on a readily available, surplus of talented, experienced players who are out there to be added to your team, to fill in the holes that you have and upgrade the spots where you feel like you need to upgrade? You have to use the transfer portal. You can't get around that. But that doesn't mean you live life without high school recruiting. That doesn't mean you minimize high school recruiting or devalue or de-emphasize high school recruiting. Because particularly for teams like Pitt that don't have the available funds to make a killing in the transfer portal the way that other schools can, you still have to get a pretty significant amount of your talent from the high school ranks. So, all right, Pitt's going to have 3 starting offensive linemen who are transfers this year. That's a lot. But they still have 2 starters who are high school recruits. The guy we're all projecting to be their number 1 wide receiver this year, high school recruit. The guy we're projecting to be their number 2 running back, who will likely get a lot of opportunities this year, high school recruit. The guy who's a returning All-American at linebacker, high school recruit. The other outside linebacker who's almost as good, maybe just as good, and possibly even better, high school recruit. Defensive ends, relying on a bunch of transfers. You're going to need transfers to produce there, no question about it. But the leader in sacks last year was a high school recruit. These defensive tackles that we're talking up, there's one in there. There's a transfer, Nick James. But the rest of that group, they're built from the high school ranks. All the linebackers, outside of Jaden Bonsu, 5 out of your top 6 linebackers, built from the high school ranks. Cornerback, they've had to supplement a little bit. They brought in Tamon Lynham. They brought in Rashawn Murray. But you still got Rashad Battle, and you've got the most improved player on defense from spring camp in Shadarian Harrison, high school recruits. The safety position, they brought in Kavir Baines-Marquez. He's going to fill out the 2 deep and fill out the rotation. But Javon McIntyre, Cruz Brookins, Jesse Anderson, they're all high school guys. if you're Pitt, you are still going to have to do a good job recruiting high school prospects because you're not going to be able to build the entirety of your roster or even an Indiana-sized portion of your roster, which was not 100%, but was still a significant percentage. You're not going to be able to build that much of your roster from the portal. And I actually think there's a world, like there's a path or an alternate universe here that we go down, that we end up in, where, while the roster limits have increased the number of scholarships you can give out, there's still limits, right? They've still put a limit on the roster size. And I still don't really expect most teams, when the roster limits are put in place and they have 105 and all that stuff, I still don't expect most teams to go up to 105 in scholarship players. I still expect most teams to settle in the 90s, probably, with scholarships. I just don't think it makes sense to have 105 guys on scholarship. But I think a possibility exists out there, like an alternate universe or one potential destination on this, crazy whatever it is that we're on. One potential destination, or alternate universe that pops up here could have Pitt benefiting from the increased emphasis on the transfer portal. And I'm thinking about some of the guys that Pitt has recruited over the years, and they ended up losing. Because a bigger school, like somebody like Ohio State or Clemson, whoever, kind of swooped in and offered a little bit later, but was able to land that kid, either flip him off his Pitt commitment or get him away from what was about to be a Pitt commitment. Like, I'm thinking about maybe a guy like Shelton Lewis. Do you remember Shelton Lewis a couple of years ago? He was committed to Pitt, defensive back, really good player. Clemson came in with an offer a little bit after he committed to Pitt. So not like really late in the process, but a little bit later in the process. And he ended up flipping to Clemson. I'm thinking about a guy like him or Jermaine Matthews, another defensive back, probably right around that same time, maybe 1 year more recently. Didn't commit to Pitt, but was close and seemed like a lock for Pitt until Ohio State came in with an offer. Maybe for some of those guys, some of the guys that Pitt has lost when other schools kind of came in with a later offer, maybe if some of those guys don't get those offers. Maybe some of those offers don't come because those schools are filling their spots with transfers. We see it all the time. We see people talk about, there's fewer spots for high school guys. Guys are getting squeezed out of scholarship spots. And so, guys who probably would have gone to a Power 4, Power 5 conference a couple years ago are now having to go to a FBS school, like a G5 school, a MAC school. And guys who would have gone to a MAC school 5 years ago, they're now having to go to FCS because there's just not the spots. There's not as many spots available. Kids are getting squeezed out of spots. We see this. We hear this all the time. Maybe that ends up leading to Pitt getting some more of those guys that they want out of the high school ranks, bringing them in, developing them, getting them on the field and succeeding with them. Like maybe there becomes almost something, I don't want to call it like a market inefficiency because that feels like a buzzword and I don't think I'm smart enough to really use it properly, but maybe there's an opportunity here, zigging when everybody else zags, right? Where you double down on the high school guys, particularly as we get into revenue sharing, when you could, I don't think we're too far away from contracts and multi-year deals where you can maybe lock a guy up for 2 years or 3 years and you can hold on to that guy and you can keep him, and then add in maybe a June, July, somewhere around their summer signing day. And maybe, whereas they've lost some of these good players over the years, like Lewis and Matthews come to mind, but there have been other guys along the way. Maybe they hold on to a few more of those guys because Ohio State, instead of swooping in with an offer later in the process, is focused on filling their spots with the transfers. They're filling spots here and there, and they're squeezed on what they really have available for high school guys. Maybe it can work out to Pitt's benefit. Maybe. I mean, we'll see how this thing goes. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this whole path can go. But if you're Pitt, you're still going to have to build the bulk of your roster out of the high school ranks. You're gonna bring in transfers to fill those open spots. You're going to bring in transfers to upgrade where you need to upgrade. When they needed a better quarterback option, they brought in Eli Holstein. When they needed to upgrade the offensive line and fill some vacant spots this offseason, they brought in 3 guys. When they've needed to upgrade the pass rush because there were some holes in the recruiting over a 2 or 3 year span, they've brought in defensive end transfers. They did it last year and they did it again this year. They've done it with wide receivers this year. That's what I think if you're Pitt, you have to look at the transfer portal as an opportunity to plug holes rather than the foundation that you're going to use to build your roster. And different positions will take different approaches. Quarterback is probably always going to be one you look at transfers, in addition to recruiting the high school guys. But by and large, I think if you're Pitt, if you're a lot of schools, high school recruiting is still going to be really important, and you're going to, I don't know if you necessarily double down on it, but you're going to commit just as much in terms of resources to high school recruiting as you did before because you're still going to build the foundation of your roster from those guys. I think you have to look at the high school recruiting as the foundation, in the frame, and then the transfers as kind of topping it off, right? Yeah. I don't know. Pick your analogy here. High school recruits are the cake and the transfers are the frosting. I don't know. Where are we going with this? I don't know. It's June. We're trying different things here, trying to come up with new metaphors, I guess, in the month of June. But I do think it's important. And I think, they're bringing in 24 guys for official visits later this week. I think that's important. Even if, let's say they get 12 commitments and they sign 7 of those guys. That's a chunk of your roster. And if they end up signing 20, 25 guys in this recruiting class, that's a fifth of your roster. A fifth of your available scholarship spots are coming from these high school recruits. And so it's important. And even if you don't hold on to all of them, even if some of them transfer, you're going to have guys who contribute. And it's going to be an important part of your roster, just as important as the transfers. The biggest difference, and probably why it's a little bit easier now to overlook high school recruiting in favor of transfers from the outside, the biggest difference is the transfers are going to help right now. You know what I mean? Deuce Spann, Blue Hicks, Blaine Spires, Joey Zielinski, Jaden Moore. All these guys are going to help in 2025. Whereas the high school recruits they signed last year, whoever it might be, they're probably not. They're going to be a couple years off. And so we all want to know where that immediate help is going to come from, and that's going to be the transfers. But that doesn't mean the high school guys aren't important because they're going to help. They're going to help down the road, and they're going to be an important piece of the puzzle. And when Pitt wins, the high school guys, the recruits who've been here for a couple of years are going to be a big part of why. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you think. Have does high school recruiting still hold interest for you? I think it should, but does it? I'd like to hear your feedback here on the comments on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pitt site on the 247 Sports Network. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend and hope your Monday gets off to a great start. Your week gets off to a great start. Have a good Monday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.